I don't really know how to start shows.
Come on now, don't start liking me now.
So yeah, I'm funny compared to, well, you'll see later. I stand for mayhem! I know a lot of idiots and think a lot of is mean-spirited just because it goes against what they believe. But the relief of comedy is it takes things that aren't funny and it allows us to laugh about them for an hour.
We got a purple suit to buy and a gigantic coffin.
Why are you laughing?
Evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Why You Laughing, a history comedy podcast. And today, I am pleased to introduce to you Nathan Fielder's Nathan for You. Really only the third TV show we've covered, although I guess there are some others that would qualify as TV episodes. Obviously, all the late night stuff we've done, I guess you could say Tom Green and Jackass, stuff like that are considered TV episodes. But as far as TV shows we've focused on, we've done Seinfeld, The Simpsons. We also did South Park versus Family Guy, but that's a little different than what we're doing today. So I think the official full history of a television show, Nathan for You might seem like an odd one to do in that order. You would think maybe All in the Family or a historic show like that. But to me, what Nathan for You did is kind of in that pantheon of innovation, which is a word I like to use a lot on this program. It's one of my favorite shows, you could probably argue ever, but certainly of the last 10 or 15 years. And I think definitely did something a lot different than a lot of shows, particularly on mainstream television, were doing in the last 15 years or so, particularly comedies. Like, you can't point to a ton of great comedies in the last 10 or 15 years that you would qualify, that you'll be showing people for decades. And it really didn't find its footing until, I would say until it was on Hulu. That's when a lot of people started to find it. And now, obviously, Nathan Fielder is blown up. Maybe eventually we will talk about Nathan Fielder's career in full, because I enjoyed the rehearsal. I've heard good things so far about The Curse that is on right now with Emma Stone. That was another reason I wanted to talk about Nathan for You, is a lot of people are talking. I see Nathan Fielder trending a lot on Twitter and all that stuff right now. And I don't know. In your professional estimation, Craig, do enough people appreciate Nathan for You? Because I really think of it as a show that you could qualify as one of the greats based on how different it is. There's not a lot that's necessarily in its category. I think you could argue maybe like some of the stuff that Tom Green did early on is definitely similar. There's certainly influence out there for it, but I don't know how much is in the category of Nathan for You, really.
I don't think so, and I think I am a prime example of it, because every time I watch it, I love it, but I never really go out of my way to see it.
Yeah, I just find him to be hysterical, and I don't know, maybe the more different shows he does, the more you start to get the joke and things. But particularly in Nathan for You, through 4 seasons, it really never got old. So I want to talk a lot about that. First, I do want to remind everyone, if you're a fan of the show, and I see, it's very nice people tweeting us their I don't know what that means necessarily. I guess we're one of the top. Like if we're in your top 5, people tweet us some list that they get from Spotify or something. So I appreciate people tweeting us those if we made your cut. But if you really want to support the show, you go to BlindMnet. That's where the real fans go, baby. That's where you can support the show for free everywhere you get podcasts, like Spotify or Apple or YouTube. Make sure this YouTube channel blows up. Spread the word, share episodes, like, comment, all of that. And then, if you want bonus episodes, if you want these episodes a week early, if you really wish, if you say, hey, I love Nathan for You, I was jonesing for it last week, where were you? Well, we were on Patreon and YouTube members. They got the episodes last week. They also get bonus episodes. So become a member on YouTube or Patreon, whichever is more convenient for you. And that's how you can support the show. We appreciate it. BlindMnet. So make sure you go there. All right. So let's get into a little bit of Nathan. Like I said, this is a Nathan for You episode, not a Nathan Fielder episode. But just for anyone that doesn't know, because I always make the mistake, I always assume like the things I'm interested in, it'll be boring if I talk about the basics. But then we always get comments saying like, oh, I actually didn't know that. So let's, this is a clip where we kind of go real quick through some of the basics of Nathan Fielder's early career.
This is a ridiculously thorough history of Nathan Fielder.
Sorry, by the way, I got it from YouTube Shorts. I apologize for the TikTok-y element of it, but it is a good summary.
This is a ridiculously thorough history of Nathan Fielder in 1 minute. When Fielder was 13 years old, he joined the Vancouver Magic Circle with a friend of his, and it was just the two of those children and a bunch of old men. That same year, he was transferred to a large public school. He ended up joining the improv team where one of his partners, Seth Rogan, said it was not even on the table that he would act like he was burning in lava. In 2005, Nathan moved to Toronto. He bought a video camera and made hundreds of experimental video shorts. When he screened his shorts, he realized that people were laughing more at his mannerisms than the actual jokes. His shorts eventually got popular enough that in 2007, he was recruited to join a show called This Hour Has 22 Minutes, where he was given an interview segment called Nathan on Your Side. In 2009, he became a writer on the Comedy Central show Important Things with Dimitri Martin, along with John H. Benjamin, then joined the cast and writing crew of John Benjamin Has a Van. And while he was there, that's when he pitched Nathan For You to Comedy Central and became the Nathan Fielder we all know and love today.
It's funny. Sometimes we talk about people and we're like, oh, I can't believe, like Gary Shandling writing on Sanfords Son. You're like, boy, that's weird. I wouldn't expect that's where he started. Nathan Fielder's early work all makes a lot of sense. And even after Nathan For You, like writing for Sacha Baron Cohen's Showtime show, makes perfect sense. Like him working with Dimitri Martin and John Benjamin, that seems to really fit. The one thing I did find interesting is, yeah, he did go to school when he was young with Seth Rogan and Evan Goldberg. He was in improv with Seth Rogan. And it's so weird to me that like there's a high school, because sometimes you'll hear stories like that, multiple famous people in the same class or whatever. It's weird because like Seth Rogan's become a strange case to me now, where he's a great example of someone that's gotten swallowed by Hollywood and just feels like his political opinions are much more important than they are, rather than his actual comedic chops. But for my childhood, like if you're talking Superbad, Knocked Up, Pineapple Express, all those movies, This Is the End, like Seth Rogen had a generational run the same way Will Ferrell, Adam Sandler, Jim Carrey did for like kids of those generations. Like my guys, I would consider Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. And in his high school, there just happened to be another comedic genius that went on to a totally separate career of Seth Rogen. Like, I think Nathan Fielder appeared in like Neighbors or something, but they're not attached to each other in any way. They just happen to be from the same town, I guess.
They happen to loosely know each other.
Yeah. And they've done, like, I've seen Seth Rogen did like an interview with Nathan Fielder and talked about him in interviews and said like when he was young, he was definitely hilarious. But when Nathan Fielder spoke of Seth Rogen, he basically said, I was a weirdo who was into magic, and Seth was more like traditionally accepted as funny, which I think makes sense if you look at both of their comedy.
Yeah, and you can go back actually and look at things like Seth Rogen at like 16 doing stand-up, and he's like crushing.
When I was listening to Nathan, he said Seth started stand-up at like 13, I think. Like he would sneak into open mics and stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, so we'll do Seth Rogen someday, but this is about Nathan Fielder. So you also heard mentioned there the Nathan on Your Side, which is a segment on a Canadian TV show called This Hour Is 22 Minutes, which was a news parody that even Nathan said very similar to The Daily Show. It had very Daily Show vibes. And I think even when you watch these clips, you'll see a lot of similarities to The Daily Show. And as I was watching these, I realized like Jon Stewart and The Daily Show don't get enough credit for this sort of style. Like I think of Ali G, obviously, when you're talking about like kind of mocking interviews, mocking like 60 Minutes or something like that. But the Daily Show actually also did a great job, and this feels very Daily Show. I'm actually surprised, given his Comedy Central background, that Nathan didn't pop up on the Daily Show. But this is the segment called Nathan on Your Side that eventually spawned Nathan For You.
What should a consumer look for when purchasing an MP3 player?
When purchasing, size is very important, anywhere from 512 megabytes to 2 gig, depending on what they want to do with that item.
Okay, so just for a visual example, I'll be the consumer coming into the store, and you sell me an MP3 player.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, just to start out that way.
Oh, hi.
Hi, how you doing? What brings
Good.
you in today?
Pardon?
What brings you in today?
Just browsing.
Just browsing. Have you seen the new iPod MP3 players available?
Oh yeah, I'm not really interested in an MP3 player.
Would you like to see what I'm speaking about?
That's okay. I'll just have a look around by myself. I think.
Okay. If you need to have any questions at all, just ask. I'll be here.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Has anything caught your eye at all?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Would you like to listen to an MP3 player?
That's okay. I'm really not interested.
Do you live in Halifax here?
Look, I'm just browsing, okay? So I'll be fine.
This guy hates his life.
Hi, my name is Daniel. What is your name?
Sorry, are you interested in like a date or something? I don't know why you keep coming up and chatting with me. I said I'm just browsing.
Have a look around. Absolutely.
So it's important to be prepared when purchasing electronics because you might encounter some annoying salespeople. I'm Nathan Fielder on your side.
Oh, I mean, to say "very Nathan for you" is an understatement. Like that's exactly what he did on the show, basically.
Yeah, that's the show.
Yeah, and that's what he would do. And what's interesting there is you hear the laugh track. Obviously, I actually think the no laugh track is much better. Like I think the laugh track takes away
For sure.
from what Nathan's doing because you don't live in the awkwardness that is the silence that's happening. You know,
Correct.
like it almost feels. Hearing that version of it, it almost feels sketchy. Like the guy is sketchy, meaning like an SNL sketch. Like that guy is in on it, you know. Whereas when you have the Nathan For You style that you just languish in silence, you feel the awkwardness and uncomfortableness that he makes you feel.
Just right from him going, no, I'm just browsing. You're like, oh, like that guy does not want to be there at all.
It's beautiful improv because it's the exact opposite of what improv is. It's instead of yes and just no. Like I'm not going along with this, and that's why, like, you know, I saw some stuff from that Showtime Sacha Baron Cohen thing, but you would think like the pairing of those two would be so amazing, and like there was some funny stuff in there, but like you would think the pairing of those two would be revolutionary because those are the two best guys at it. Like Borat and Ali G and Nathan For You would probably be, I mean, you'd have to think like Mount Rushmore of just making you feel awkward in comedy. Yeah. Those three and Andy Kaufman, I would think.
Definitely. That's
by the way, I'm aware that Ali G and Borat are the same guy. I just wanted to make that clear before I get comments on it.
Did we do a coaching tree actually on the Kaufman episode? Because that's exactly what it would be, as those two.
I definitely mentioned Sacha Baron Cohen. I think I did. I shouldn't say definitely, but I don't know that I mentioned Nathan Fielder because these two guys are obvious descendants of Andy Kaufman, and that's what I was talking about. Where like Kaufman, while at times I think we said this in the episode, but too much was discussed of like how insane Andy Kaufman was, where I think he was just a little off the wall guy that liked making people feel uncomfortable. I don't think he was this megalomaniac that like the movie like Jim Carrey depicted him as. But what he did do is open the door for guys like Nathan Fielder that found a different way to make people laugh and make people laugh at the awkwardness rather than some sort of set up punchline or a character or something like that. So we have one more from Nathan on your side, right?
Yeah, the real estate.
Yeah, let's hear that.
Is now a good time to buy a home?
Interest rates are stable now. You can still get a good rate. So it is very good time to buy.
Okay, so this is a new home that we're in right now. What room is this?
The master bedroom.
And what would go on in here?
Pardon?
Like if a couple bought this place, what would they do in here?
Well, it's the master bedroom, so this is where the people would probably purchase a very nice bedroom set.
Yeah, but what else? Like what else would they do in here, if you catch my drift?
Yeah.
She wants to
Do you
die.
catch my drift?
I think so.
And what is my drift?
I'm not quite sure, actually.
Like if a couple bought this place,
Yeah.
what would they do in here, if you catch my drift?
What would you do in here?
What would I do in here? Well, I'd probably be alone. You know, find a way to enjoy myself, if you catch my drift.
Okay. Okay. I don't think I have any other questions.
It's funny because it's just a statement on like how polite or uncomfortable people are, whereas like in reality, if you broke it down, if this woman just said like, "Oh, you're implying like if they would have sex in here," is that what you're trying to say? And then the conversation's kind of over, or Nathan would be like, "Oh God, I didn't mean that," something like that. But like it shows off how uncomfortable we are. We're like, "You're a stranger. I don't want to talk about this with you," when in reality it's not that. We all know exactly what he's referring to.
We all caught his drift. Yeah,
we all caught his drift, but there's just such a discomfort in saying that he's exposing with these interactions.
It's so funny too, because if you're just listening, she will not look at him throughout this whole thing. She's looking up, down, left, right.
And that's always my favorite part when thinking about these, because at this time, obviously, Nathan Fielder's not famous or anything. No one knows who he is. So the idea that these people think they're just on some like Canadian news program, like local news or something like that. They're like, what is this guy doing? This is never going to make the air. What is he doing?
He's great. I've always, like I said, I watched season 1 and 2 of Nathan For You. And then I stopped, and I don't know why.
Yeah, so, well, I was the opposite, actually, because I was still in college when Nathan For You started. And I would watch, South Park or whatever I was watching that on Comedy Central. And I would see commercials for Nathan For You. And the way they market it, and I'm not even sure this is their fault, but it was like this, dramatic music. Like it made it seem like it was going to be this hardcore, program. And then at the end, they just have Nathan For You go, "Hi," in his kind of like sheepish voice.
Yeah.
And when I see those commercials, like I said, I'm not even sure it's their fault, but because my instinct was like, "Oh, I get it. He's weird. He's awkward." But then so I didn't even really give it a chance for a while. And then once you do, you realize like, oh, he's brilliantly funny. Like the stuff that he's doing, it's not just like Flight of the Concords, who I liked when I was a kid. But a lot of people's criticism of Flight of the Concords was the more it went on, it's like, we get it, they're awkward. But another thing about Flight of the Concords is they're scripting it that way.
Right.
Like they're scripting the awkward interactions. Whereas Nathan Fielder is going out into the world and probably failing a lot. I'm sure there's a ton of footage they couldn't use because the guy got the joke or knew who Nathan was or something.
Yeah.
So that to me is more impressive. And that's why Borat is such an amazing film. And I don't think it's weird. You almost don't think of Borat as like a movie, like a comedy movie. Because when I think of my favorite comedies of all time, I go, Superbad, Tropic Thunder, or whatever. Borat often slips my mind because you don't even really think of it as a movie because it seems like a different work of art. And that's what I was saying at the beginning of the episode with Nathan For You is like, you don't think of this as a sitcom, certainly. Like there's not even really a defined genre because so few people are good at that, I think.
Yeah, and that was a perfect description of Flight of the Concords too, because it was awkward, but like you said, it was
they're creating the
Right.
awkwardness,
And
and there's some of that with The Office as well, where it's
Right.
like, and I think that's why Curb seems more natural, because there's an element of that with Curb, but it's improv. So
yeah, like
it's
90%.
there's a little more, at least the feeling of naturalness to it.
And season 1 of Flight of the Concords, it was awesome. I loved it, but they had those songs written and then wrote the show around that.
And they admitted that too, where they're like, we had to write all new songs. We didn't expect a second season, honestly. So.
Right. So they did season 2 and they mapped it out and then had to write songs around that instead. So it was backwards. That's why it wasn't as good.
Right.
But yeah, no, like the balls that he has to stick to and not break character, like the episode where he goes camping with people on a mountain so they can save like 30 cents on gas.
Yeah. Well,
it's just
here's the thing. There's an intangible to Nathan Fielder that you could not coach, you could not teach anyone. Partially because a lot of what makes Nathan Fielder funny is his voice and his temperament.
Correct.
That a lot of people don't have. You couldn't just take even someone who's really funny. I don't think you could coach them into doing this well.
Never.
Because they would break, or there would be times where they wouldn't be as awkward as Nathan is just kind of naturally being. Like, this is an exaggerated version of who he actually is in some way.
Yeah.
So that's impossible to duplicate, I think. Whereas there are forms of stand-up that I think you can kind of learn what's going to be funny. You can learn how to write a joke more so than you can learn to do whatever this is.
I think Francis Ellis could pull it off, possibly. He's got like
I don't know enough about his
he's always very monotone. His volume's different, but he's very monotone, and that I think that's the key to Nate. He's always on the same level.
Well, subconsciously, probably what made me think of doing this episode. Like I said, I know the curse is very popular right now, but also we had our friend David Collins from David Collins' 30-minute half-hour show on the Blind Mike Project the other day.
Why do you bring him up?
And like he stonewalls you.
Oh man,
it's weird. Like, you can't get him to break, and I think that's an ability. And we'll see one example of Nathan breaking ever so slightly later. But like, his ability to stay just stone-faced in these moments is pretty incredible.
It's insane, absolutely insane. But next we have the BS report, and they're talking about the idea.
Yeah, so Simmons had him on a couple times. We have clips from a couple different Bill Simmons interviews. One that he did in 2013 when the show first started, and the other one I think is from 2017 when the show was ending. So kind of bookending there. And it was interesting. Bill Simmons doesn't get enough credit's the wrong word because he's very successful. Yeah. But like, he does at times have his finger on the pulse of some stuff in like comedy and entertainment and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where he has Nathan Fielder on for this interview, and then when I listened to the interview from 2017, Nathan goes, "Yeah, no one knew who I was at that time," and like the BS report was very big, obviously. And he goes, "So I got more texts and like emails and stuff with people congratulating me for being on the Bill Simmons podcast than I got for Nathan For You getting on the air,"
which is crazy.
So Bill Simmons was at the forefront. He had Nathan on very early. And they talk about, so obviously, Nathan worked for Comedy Central in different variations with John Benjamin and Dimitri Martin. So him and Michael Coman were able to pitch the idea of Nathan For You. Very similar, like I said, to Nathan on Your Side, but more of a marketing angle to it where Nathan is going to come in and help your business. And so this is them talking about the early stages of the show.
After I was done on that show, I pitched, a version of this show to Comedy Central, and then Michael and I figured out what's a way to add more elements and make it more interesting. And we like the marketing world. I think is a very fun area to make fun of. And I went to business school. I did my undergrad in. I did a Bachelor of Commerce degree before I started doing comedy. Yeah. So I've always wanted to kind of make fun of that world a bit because that mindset and that attitude is fun to go in where you're thinking of the world in a very specific way. It's all about promoting. And sometimes the focus in that area is like people people put less emphasis on, wait, how does this idea make the world a better place? And it's more about, well, this will help business. And that's the important thing. And I think that attitude is kind of destructive and weird, but it's fun to emulate that maybe.
Yeah, and you also talked about how, not too far before that, you have the housing crisis and Bernie Madoff and a lot of stories in the news like that. And he said what was interesting about a lot of those is like a lot of it involves people who were essentially being polite or like going along with something or afraid to say no or afraid to speak up.
Yeah.
Because like you kind of just go with the flow, especially if you think you're making money or something like that.
Right.
And so the insight of that is so brilliant to say, I can go to these businesses with ridiculous ideas and get people to go along with them. But I think the true genius of what Nathan was doing was the ideas were idiotic is the wrong word because the ideas were ridiculous, but there was a genius to them in a sense. Like one of my favorites for this example is the poo flavored yogurt. Did you ever see this one?
Yes, I did.
So he gets an ice cream store to put poo flavored yogurt out for like as a marketing thing to be like, hey, we have frozen yogurt that tastes like shit. Not just bad frozen yogurt. It literally tastes like shit. And obviously that sounds like a horrible idea. But then you're like, especially when you hear Nathan explain it, you're like, yeah, people are dumb. Maybe they'll come in to taste the poo flavored yogurt and to wash that out of their mouth, they'll get some cookie dough or something,
And you'll upcharge the shit out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like there is an element of brilliance where you're like, oh, God, that could work.
Yeah, it could.
Yeah. So, so the genius of him to like kind of see that in people and know how to play with it really was brilliant.
But next, staying with Simmons, they talk about his deadpan delivery,
which is obviously like, the key to the show. And like, if you're talking about Andy Kaufman, this is completely Andy Kaufman, completely Sacha Baron Cohen, obviously a lot of influence there in his delivery, I would say.
You seem totally comfortable on the show, and like this deadpan thing you have going where you're just not fazed by however the situation is going.
Yeah.
So how do you explain that? If you're not comfortable, but then you're somehow can roll with any punches and seem totally unfazed.
Well, when I'm on the show and I know I'm doing it I have a certain goal in mind and I'm trying to create moments with people that are funny, I can go into that zone fairly
So you're like
easily.
playing a character.
A little bit. I think part of what the show is that I think an old version of myself, I mean, your listeners probably have no idea what the show is or anything, but
well, we're going to explain it.
It's fine. But yeah, I think that personally, like off camera and growing up, I had a lot of difficulty in social situations and I would panic and I wouldn't be able to really communicate properly. And also I couldn't read subtlety that well. So if someone didn't like me or liked me or thought I was nuts, it would be hard for me to tell. So unless they said it overtly, I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
So part of, I think, what I do in the show and with my comedy in general is I'm almost making fun of that version of me, and I'm creating a world in which subtlety can't exist for other people. So I think if someone doesn't overtly tell me they don't want to do something, then I'm not registering that.
And that's what's so great about the show is that it exposes people's assumption in like knowing how we each feel. Meaning like if I give you an answer like, yeah, if you ask me like, do you think this is a good idea? And I go, obviously, no, he doesn't think it's a good idea.
Right.
But Nathan says, hey, I'm not hearing no, so I'm just going to do it.
Right. Right.
And he's in a way coaching people to be more direct, which is brilliant. And the other thing I really liked about that clip, as someone who is extremely awkward and uncomfortable in his own skin, I've always, like, my instinct has always been like, how can I better that, or how can I change it, or how can I, kind of evolve? Nathan's instinct was to play to that and say, how can I use that to my advantage? Because you would watch this show and think, well, behind the scenes, this guy must be extremely confident to pull this off, to not break, to be able to go out and do this and keep a straight face. He must be extremely confident. When in reality, he was a weird guy that was uncomfortable in certain social situations and couldn't read people, and said, "How can I use that to make something hilarious?"
I would need, like, I don't even know a scenario that I would be placed in where it's like, hey, don't break during this and you can get like whatever amount of money. I would never see a dime. Like, I would just break in like 2 seconds. So I'm always just fascinated with how stone faced he is.
Well, that's the thing, especially in these situations. Part of you is not even breaking from it being funny. It's like to cut the tension. Like,
right.
If you're staring at a person in awkward silence and the other person's staring at you back, just out of discomfort, eventually you'll laugh or something. But that's why he's the perfect guy for it.
Right. But even like the real estate video we watched, when he's like, I'd probably do something, myself, catch my drift. Just the fact that he immediately just knows to turn it into the exact same thing.
At every point you would say, I'm just kidding, or I'm messing around.
Right.
He continues the bit.
Right. Which is, it's perfect. Next we have them talking about nice people.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of what I was talking about before, where like he was able to essentially take advantage of politeness.
Go to these businesses a lot of the times. These business owners are really nice, sweet people most of the time. I'm sure that comes across.
Yes.
So, I'll pitch the idea and you can kind of see on their face that they think it's bad and they don't want to do it. But at the same time, they don't want to hurt my feelings and tell me it's a stupid idea because they're just nice people. So a lot of times it seems like they'll go along with something because they just don't want to offend me or hurt my feelings. And that's always, I think, interesting to watch, because it's a lot of shows. I feel like you see real people stuff where you go into situations to get people mad sometimes, but these people, their kindness comes out in a way. But that's what I was talking about with the subtlety doesn't exist. If the owner doesn't say, I don't want to do it, get out of here, I assume he wants to do it. Even if his face is kind of like, oh, okay.
And I always wonder how they get people to go along with these things, because obviously you have to sign away certain rights and things like that to be shown on these shows. And also, like, with Impractical Jokers as the example, they're big enough to the point, like when they were here in Boston, they sold out the Wang Theater multiple shows, which is a 3,000 seat venue. So you would hear that and ask yourself, well, if someone's walking down the street and Sal Vulcano walks up to you saying something insane, wouldn't you be like, hey, you seem familiar?
Right.
But what kind of across the board, these guys, so what I've heard a lot of these people that do hidden camera shows and things like that, what a lot of them say is just, you'd be surprised how much, people want to be on TV for some reason.
Right.
Which I think that's how I think Nathan played to a lot of those advantages, where if he says, hey, I'm doing a show, I'm doing some reality show on, Bravo or something, where we're, whatever the network is, where we're, taking small businesses and trying to lift them up. People are like, hey, that's going to be good for business. But also there's something to, like, just people aren't really fully paying attention all the time, Like,
right.
people aren't saying, people are more focused on the immediacy of, like, well, this is going to be weird if I call this guy out, especially if we're on camera or whatever. Fine. To make me more comfortable right now, I'll go along with this. Well, and I think that's what this type of comedy exposes so much.
Yeah, and on top of it, he comes across as, like, legitimately some kind of special needs.
Yeah, you're like, he's autistic. I don't want to let him down.
Right.
Whatever he wants.
Well, and from what he says, it kind of sounds like he might actually have it.
I mean, I'm sure there's some element to it. Obviously, he's very, high functioning. But
right. But next we have the free bird of Nathan for you, which is Dumb Starbucks.
Yeah, so I would say this is his. It's hard to argue. The one we're going to talk about after might have been as big, but I think if you ask the average, if the Family Feud style, this would probably be the number one answer, I would think.
For sure.
But this is the first time I heard of Nathan Fielder, because I heard about Dumb Starbucks before I knew who Nathan Fielder was. I heard, people thought it was like Banksy, or that people had all these theories as to what exactly Dumb Starbucks was. So essentially, what's that?
I was going to say this hit the news before the show was even announced.
Yes. So let me explain real quick. Because Nathan was helping out a small coffee shop, try to drum up business, and Nathan had the idea of just plastering a giant Starbucks sign outside so people think it's Starbucks. And then they said, well, obviously you can't do that. That's illegal. Starbucks will sue you. So he says, well, wait a minute. What about parody law? That's how like SNL gets away with impersonating people, things like that, like fair use and parody law. So if I put dumb on it, clearly I'm mocking Starbucks. So that's a parody of Starbucks. So now, and again, much like I said about the poo flavored yogurt, like, genius. That does make sense.
Oh yeah, because you're gonna
long term. I don't think it's gonna work, but it makes sense to get people in the door.
Because you're just gonna see the logo and go
right.
And your brain's just gonna go Starbucks and not see the small typed out dumb on it.
Well, it became a thing of like mocking Starbucks, and then it got even more publicity because Starbucks was going to sue Dumb Starbucks for brand infringement or copyright infringement, whatever it is. Yeah. So it makes the news. People don't know what this is. And this is season 2 of Nathan For You, I think. And Nathan Fielder said that he would have much rather, and I agree, I think this would have been better, but I also actually get where Comedy Central's coming from. So what Nathan wanted is no one ever says anything about who owns it, or like it never goes public until the show airs on a Wednesday night at 10:30 p.m. And then the, people watching all go, oh shit, that was Nathan Fielder that owns Dumb Starbucks. But Comedy Central said like, hey, this is a show that has a fringe audience. We need publicity. And I actually do kind of get that in a sense.
Yep.
So they jumped out ahead of it and said, actually, it's Nathan Fielder. So Nathan Fielder had to actually give a press conference outside. By the way, I don't know if I said this already. Line around the block for Dumb Starbucks. This became like a massive success.
Yeah.
And so Nathan has to address the press.
I don't need permission to use their logo because we're operating under parody law, which means as long as we're making fun of Starbucks, we are allowed to use their corporate identity. Starbucks has not contacted me personally, but they have made statements through the press that I'm, kind of disappointed with, as a fan of Starbucks, I don't want to cause, David or Goliath thing going on, but I do want to say if they keep the pressure up, they do risk losing me as a customer. The dumb is just not a necessity. My entire marketing plan depended on using their corporate logo to get attention, and the only way to legally do it is by using dumb. So it was the minimum we could do to abide by the law. I love Starbucks. This has been overwhelming. Obviously we didn't expect to have this much attention, and there's been lines around the block, and very few small businesses get that from the start. So it kind of proves how good of an idea this actually was in terms of people are coming because they recognize that Starbucks name, yet we are legally able to use it and operate as an independent coffee shop. A company of that size, if they were going to, would have done something by now. But I think, we can tell how smart they are because they're making the wise choice by not pursuing a case they know they can't win.
He's just challenging them.
He knows it will be better for his show if he's getting sued by Starbucks.
Of course. Yeah, so, but the reason I hesitated when you said the biggest one is because he had a couple of these go very viral, which is pretty incredible for a show that, not a ton of people were like season 1 was 500,000 viewers an episode or less,
Mhm.
which is like, for 10:30 on cable, it's not terrible, but it's not a tremendous amount of people.
And back when it aired too, that number's not that
10
high.
years ago, yeah. So like it is a fringe show, and yet Nathan was able to make news in at least a couple of different seasons. So the other one that
Hold on,
made
real
me,
quick, quick before we move on from Dumb Starbucks, the only, if I recall right, the reason that it actually didn't end up working was just because he didn't get like a food license. It wasn't even the parody thing, if I'm recalling correctly.
You might be right. There are also like the storyline in a lot of these where like they tug at your heartstrings. Where like the business owner is like, Nathan, what are we doing? And Nathan just takes over. Like it gets so big that Nathan's now in charge, and he has pushed the business owner aside.
Oh, and you know what else was crazy is because it got shut down because they found that loophole. I think it was like because they were selling food and they didn't have a proper license. I'm almost positive that's why. But like dumb Starbucks cups and stuff were going for so much money on eBay.
Right.
Like $300 for a styrofoam cup.
I remember I didn't know who Nathan Fielder was, and I heard of Dumb Starbucks. I remember that.
Yeah.
There was also, I mean, there are so many great sketches, but like or episodes, but there's one where he gets a pizza place to offer if they're not there in 30 minutes or less, you get a second pizza free. So people are like, okay, great. And inevitably they were never there, and it might have been like 8 minutes or something impossible.
Yeah.
It was like 8 minutes or something like that. And so Nathan would give them a second pizza that was just a tiny, it was not a slice of pizza. It was a tiny little slab of dough with sauce and cheese on it.
It was smaller than like those table talk pies.
Yeah, and so he had these like marketing ideas that were on some level, like with any pushback, you would say these aren't going to work. But at first glance, you're like, okay, that'll drum up some. I see what you're going for,
I get what you're doing.
So I mentioned the other viral video. Let's hear Nathan talk about it first, and then we'll get more into it.
So, would you title the clip?
Sorry. It does warrant a little more setup. So this one, Nathan is helping a petting zoo. He's trying to get more business for a petting zoo.
Yeah.
And he said, what's popular right now is viral videos. That's just a great form of marketing. So if we get a video with, some of your animals to go viral, then that'll be great marketing for the petting zoo. So he wants a pig to save a baby goat. That's the idea of the video. And so they set up like with scuba divers and all these camera tricks and all this kind of stuff, that a pig saves a baby goat from drowning. Like pig jumps in the water and saves the baby goat. And so Nathan posts this video, and it took off more than he could imagine.
Would you title the clip?
It said pig rescues baby goat.
And you didn't email it to one person?
No, I mean, the only people that knew about it, I guess, were the people that worked on the show. But we just put it on YouTube, and then.
So you go to bed and you wake up the next morning, and what happens?
A website I go to sometimes is Gawker. So I literally just, went on there and I saw our video, and I was thinking, oh my God, this is absurd. This is so funny. How did this happen? And then I saw on Reddit, or someone told me it's all over Reddit. I guess people were posting it. It was up on the front page. And at that point, it's kind of scary because, okay, this is a bit out of our control. Then I got to work, and someone said, oh, I saw that on CNN. Someone who didn't actually know about it, that it was fake. Yeah. And then we saw it on all these morning shows. And then that evening, it was on the nightly news with Brian Williams.
That was my favorite part. I mean, you'd think they would have had editorial standards.
I think this is before Brian Williams got canned,
right,
for his own fabrications. But this is interesting. And Nathan also said, I think he told the New York Times, like, he goes, what's interesting is if we set out to make journalism look ridiculous, imagine what we could have done.
No kidding.
You know what I mean? Like this, the intent of this wasn't get a bunch of people to misreport it. It's like, let's see if we can get, 250,000 views for a fake video.
And this was back when, like, you see a video, you assume it's real. Unlike today, that I have to like look up 17 sources to make sure I'm not getting deep faked.
Yeah, I mean, fake videos certainly existed 10 years ago, but yeah, you're right. It's not like there wasn't a whole where now we'll play clips on WATS Thursdays at 6, by the way, folks. We'll play clips on there where people are like, idiots, you didn't know this was fake, and I'm like, I guess I didn't assume it was. I don't know.
Right, like, and now you have to assume that everything's
yeah.
fake.
So now you kind of have to assume anything could be fake, whereas back then that wasn't necessarily the case as much. But yeah, it like the intention was not to make CNN and NBC report on this and have them look silly. Video ends up getting 7 million views, and that's when the episode aired, I think. Now I don't know how many it has, but like before people knew it was fake, it had about 7 million views, and it goes crazy. It's all over the news, and like I said, Nathan basically said the most interesting thing, and that's got to be a scary element too, because people have said before, what's eye-opening is when something journalistically, something in the news, whatever, is reported about you. Like even on a much smaller scale, but like I was mentioned in Julie DeCaro's book, and she lists me as like Kirk Minahan's co-host or something, and it's like that would have taken 3 seconds for you to look up, and it was published in a book. And so it makes you kind of realize, like, oh, I wonder how many things that book gets wrong. And then it makes you think, I wonder how many things every book gets wrong.
Right.
So with like Nathan Fielder, he's like, oh, CNN and NBC and, the Today Show and Good Morning America and all these outlets are getting this wrong. That must be the level of effort they put into everything, which is astonishing.
I just looked up the video on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
It was posted 11 years ago and is averaging 1 million views a year still.
Oh, good. Well, this is the other thing they talked about, where what's crazy is, look at how many people have seen that video and think about how many people have watched Nathan For You. Now, again, Nathan Fielder, like The Rehearsal was very popular, and this Emma Stone show is very popular. Nathan Fielder's trending often. I think a lot more people know who Nathan Fielder is than when Nathan For You was on the air. But so many more people saw that video than have seen Nathan For You.
Right.
That there are people out there, and I don't know the number, but a percentage of that, however many million at this point, a percentage of them, if you said, hey, I wonder if a pig has ever saved a baby goat, they would say, as a matter of fact, I've seen it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And they'll just go through life assuming that they saw that and it was real, and they tucked it back in their memory, and they might not even remember that they saw it at this point. But if a pig and a baby goat get brought up, they'll be like, hey, I saw a video where one was saving the other.
Well, so it has 11 million video views right now, and you got to assume. So, like, what did you say? Like 500,000 people might have watched an episode.
Yeah, but even let's say 6 million people have seen Nathan For You at this point. They're 10 million. There's still a million people.
Right. I was gonna say like 2 or 3 million probably have seen the show at some point.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just fascinating to think about. But there's a little more on this viral video, right?
The debate.
Yeah, so this is what was interesting is conversation. Not only is the news covering it, conversations started to pop up around this video, and this is what Nathan also found interesting.
The craziest thing was this debate it started online where people were saying it was people were using it to prove their mandates, where kind of vegans were saying, like, see, this proves that animals are more intelligent than humans, more intelligent than we thought. And science blogs were posting it and saying, this is proof. A lot of people were saying, like, we're terrible to animals, and this here proves that animals are smarter than we thought, and smarter than us. And people were saying a human wouldn't jump in to save that goat, but an animal did. So it was crazy, the people that congregated around it and used it as kind of a tool to sell a point, which was maybe the funniest part that no one's actually really talked about.
So you validated all of these people's feelings about different things, but yet it was a totally fake video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to see that debate happen.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I know.
So, and I mean, how often do we see that now in the news all the time where people get so worked up over these things? And you know what? A great example, this just popped in my mind. A great similar bit to this is in Aziz Ansari's last special. It was like after he got canceled for the thing that was ridiculous that he got canceled for. But he came back and did a Netflix special. And he did an apology right out of the gate and then kind of slowly walked back that apology throughout the special, I thought, is how I took it. And he has one great bit where he talks about, I forget the specifics. I forget if he says the New York Times reported on it, and I forget if he says Pizza Hut or maybe just a generic pizza place. But essentially he brings up this news story where a pizza place made a swastika out of pepperonis on a pizza.
Yes, they did.
And the person that got this pizza, took a picture of it, puts it on social media, calls out the pizza place, says, I can't believe, these racists at this pizza place put a swastika on my pizza. And then a debate started online where some people said it was a swastika, some people said it wasn't a swastika. And then he asked the audience, he goes, how many people here think it was a swastika? And, a portion of the audience cheers. And he says, how many people think it wasn't a swastika? And the rest of the audience cheers. And he says, what's interesting about that story is it never happened. I just made it up. And so he suckered the audience into believing this thing that taking a side. They took a side. The audience took a stand on this issue that he just made up.
I thought that actually did happen.
Huh?
I thought that did happen.
No, Craig's even believing it now. Which is even more of a statement on all of this. But that's my point, is like what's brilliant about it is like you get people so with their heels dug in on this issue, and it's something that's entirely fake. And so people are saying like, this is what pigs can save goats. And meanwhile, it's just Nathan Fielder and a scuba diver making a city video for Comedy Central.
CNN, June 29th, 2020. Couple receives pizza with pepperoni swastika.
Interesting. I don't know. I mean, this is not the time or the program to get into this. But
I just want to prove.
Yeah, I don't know. The punchline to the Aziz bit was that it didn't happen. So
that was I think that might have actually come out after the special.
I was gonna say I think that also was after the special. But
next we have Cry Wolf.
So this is one of the fascinating things from Nathan for you is I mentioned it in the pantheon of Seinfeld and The Simpsons and these great shows. It also had a spin-off. So let's just play this clip and I'll tell you more about it.
Investigate. People come to me with questions.
I need you to find out where he is.
My job is to get him answers.
What are you doing here?
I collect the evidence.
Wow, what an embrace.
I uncover the truth. Where you going?
I can't stay here. He could kill me.
This is what I do, and I'm damn good at it.
Guys, leave it. Let's go. I'm not going to lose him. Let's go.
The question is, are you sure you want to know?
Cry Wolf, all new. Tuesdays at 10. Only on Investigation Discovery.
So that guy was Nathan Fielder's private investigator, who I believe Nathan Fielder says now hates him. But he did get a spin-off out of it. But the way he was brought into the show was this guy had... Nathan kept mentioning what horrible Yelp reviews he had. And the guy's like, what is that? What is Yelp? Just Google me. Don't look at Yelp. Don't worry about that. But to warrant hiring this man, like Nathan Fielder wasn't sure about his qualifications. So he said, I want you to follow me for a day, and if I think you do a good job, you're hired.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian Wolf's private investigator says, easy peasy, no problem. But what Nathan did is hire like 8 lookalikes. So people that look like Nathan were just leaving his house at all hours of the day and coming back to his house. Yeah, he had like doppelgangers just swarming his home, so this guy couldn't keep track of which one was Nathan. Again, so brilliantly done.
Very funny.
Yeah, and there was also so what Nathan did later is there was a security guard involved in the show that was also very funny. His name was Simon. And they tried to pick, because this Brian Wolf guy got a reality show and then ended up kind of turning his back on the show. Nathan tried to get Simon a reality show called Simon Sees. And it was about a security guard who was very focused on large-breasted women.
I'm surprised it didn't work out.
There were so many great characters on this show. Like one guy who they brought back, they did a dating show where Nathan wanted to, kind of get better at interpersonal relationships and dating. So he held like a fake bachelor show where he obviously is the bachelor.
Mhm.
And to make it seem realistic for the women, they obviously had to make it look like a real show. So they hired a host. So they hired like some actor that thought he was hosting a reality show. And meanwhile, he was just introducing Nathan to these women. But then like they ended up bringing him back. So that guy ended up hosting like a 1-hour special they did before the 4th season. So like they ended up using some of these guys. There's also a guy, I'm blanking on his name right now, but a guy that worked in Nathan's office that he used a lot. He tried to find him love. And we'll also get to Bill, who was in the finale in a minute. But a lot of great characters developed through Nathan For You. People that you really felt for.
You felt for everybody.
Yeah.
Next is Wire Walk.
Oh, so this is so. There's also an episode where he had to, do like a trapeze walk, basically. And watching that, I thought he's like able to pull it off. And I thought watching it, you just kind of assume like, well, he was into magic as a kid. Maybe he practiced on the trapeze or something. Maybe he has some sort of skill, or maybe they got a stunt man or something. But what he's talking about here is why the show was so authentic and well done.
Yeah, when we were coming up with that episode, that was actually an idea we had in the 2nd season of the show, and we didn't really have the resources or time to execute it properly, so we like put it on hold. And when we started to do the 3rd season, we were like, okay, we knew we wanted to do that.
Yeah.
So we had kind of thought about it, and I started training like very early. But in the initial discussions, I remember we talked for a while about there's got to be a way to do this where I don't have to be the one wire walking, because it's such a waste of time for such a small, like it's one part of one episode. And to learn this is like everyone we talked to, they were saying like it takes like 2 or 3 years to kind of really do it at that scale where you can do that. And so we couldn't figure out a funnier way or another way to do it. So I just started working at it, and I started like doing it while we were shooting and writing. I would like train on the weekends.
Isn't that what makes the show great though? Is that you went all in on this one event that was a small part of one episode, and you spent 9 months training to do it?
Yeah,
and that's kind of the secret sauce there.
Yeah.
So, and that's hit the nail on the head there, where like, yes, you could have gotten a stunt man of some kind to do that, but and maybe we'd be none the wiser in the episode. But we're also not talking about Nathan Fielder in the same way like we are today. And I don't think he has the reputation around him that he does, because what made that show great was the 100% dedication to it, to making it authentic and putting Nathan in these sort of situations. If you put a stuntman in that situation, it's not the same. It doesn't have the same feel to it.
It probably would now, because we'd be like, oh, that's so Nathan.
Man. Well, that's the thing is it's hard to build up to that, I think. But there is an element now where it's like anything he does, you're like, oh, good job, Nate. You're a genius. You almost can't break that reputation at this point.
I can't question anything you do.
That's true.
Next we have him telling a late night story.
Oh, so yeah, we'll play a clip and I'll tell you why. It might seem boring at first, but I'll tell you why I included this. This is him on Jimmy Kimmel.
I get off the plane, I get my luggage, I get my rental car, I go to the hotel. And when I open my suitcase, my jaw literally drops because none of my clothes are inside. But the bag is mine. So I'm like having this weird thing where I like don't understand. I realize what happened. It's like someone had the identical bag to me and I took it. And it's a big problem because like my suit for the wedding was in my bag and I'm literally in shorts and a t-shirt.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah, like literally.
travel in your worst clothes because, like, if the plane goes down, you're not going to get blood on your nice clothes,
Yeah.
So he's doing this interview, and he's kind of doing it. I will say the one thing I found interesting, like I found a few interviews where he's like in character, but I was able to find some, like you hear him with Bill Simmons, and he's like, oh, he's talking like a regular guy.
Yeah.
What I found interesting in this Jimmy Kimmel clip, like the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, he's being like charming. It's a typical talk show guest where he came in with a wacky airline vacation mix-up story. Like, oh, that's interesting. That doesn't strike me as Nathan Fielder. And then when you see the episode on Comedy Central, there's an episode centered around this where he gets invited on Jimmy Kimmel, and he say, he's worried his stories are too boring. So what he does is he makes up the perfect late night talk show story, but he doesn't want to be exposed as a liar. So he recreates that. He makes sure this happens, that his bag gets mixed up. He goes to the wedding that he's supposed to be at in case one day he ever gets called out for this story being a lie. He comes up with a great late night talk show story and then made it happen.
Made it real.
Yeah.
Oh, that's too funny.
So it's so well done in the sense that he's taking things like that's something too, where it's making fun of these fairly generic late night pre-interview setup talk show moments, and just like kind of exposing what that is. Like, oh well, let's try and create one of those, which would obviously be ridiculous, and then you see how ridiculous that would be.
Right. Next, we have maybe the shortest clip in the history of the show.
Yeah, I hope this plays. I hope this translates. So this is with Bill, one of my favorite characters, Bill, who we'll talk about a little more in a minute. But Bill was a Bill Gates impersonator who ended up being used a couple more times on the show. And then the more Nathan used him, the more you realize how crass he is. So he's talking about having relations with a woman. And this is the one time I saw Nathan break, because there's an episode we're about to talk about where you're almost like, I'm not sure if this is totally set up. And this is a moment where you're like, oh, okay, maybe Nathan is realizing this is who this Bill guy is when he's talking about, betting the ladies.
I hate to use that term. You got to know what you're sticking it in.
Jesus, Bill.
You never, in the history of, like, if you haven't seen the episode, maybe that clip doesn't make any sense to you, but you never saw that in the 4-year run of the show where Nathan's like Nathan's the one that's taken aback, where he's like, Jesus Christ.
He's getting,
you gotta know what you're sticking it in.
He's getting Nathaned by this guy.
Yeah, maybe. So Bill, well, first, what's our next clip? I don't want to give too much away about Bill.
The greatest intro ever.
Oh, yeah. So while we're talking about segments from the show, it's one of the hardest laughs I've gotten from a TV show maybe ever. Is the first time, like, so I binged these on Hulu. I may have seen one or two when it was on Comedy Central, but the real like watch through I did was when it was on Hulu. So I'm just binging these, and then this episode called "The Claw" comes on, and this is just how the episode starts, and I think it's the greatest television intro of all time.
Good evening. We're coming to you from the historic Elysian Park in Los Angeles, California. Now, every week on my show, I challenge people to take big risks, but some have been critical that I never take risks myself. Well, tonight, that's all going to change. Over the past month, I've been learning how to pick the lock on these police-grade handcuffs. Why, you ask? Because tonight, I'm going to take a bigger risk than anyone has ever taken on television before. In just a few moments, I'm going to be handcuffed to this solid steel frame, and I'll have exactly 90 seconds to free myself before the claw on this robotic arm undoes my pants, exposing me to an audience of children. If that happens, an LAPD officer is standing by to arrest me for indecent exposure. We've all seen escape artists risk death before, but tonight, I'm going to risk something even worse. becoming a registered sex offender for life. And what you're going to see tonight is 100% real. Welcome to Nathan For You. This is the Claw of Shame.
There's just something great about not expecting that and hearing, like, risking becoming a sex offender. This is Nathan For You.
when he goes exposing myself, you're like, oh, that'll be funny on TV. He goes to all these kids and they're just sitting
to
there.
a group of children. And then throughout the episode, like, obvious, I have to assume they have it set up so it's not actually going to happen in that way.
Yeah, like the kids aren't actually there or something.
But through, like, as you're watching the episode, you're like, he's getting close to getting his pants pulled down, and these kids are all intently looking on. But that's again that deadpan delivery. Like, you couldn't just put someone else in that show and have it be anywhere near as funny. It's not possible.
I mean, trying to film that scene, I would break every single time.
Right? Yeah, and I'm saying even there are other comedic geniuses that couldn't pull that off with that delivery.
No one. I don't know if anyone could pull it off. Like maybe Kaufman, I guess. But like, we're on our last clip here.
Yeah, so this is where we're going to talk a little bit more about Bill, because, again, to talk about Nathan For You standing in television history, the finale is one of the most beautiful things ever put on television. It's so well done and such a departure from what the rest of the show is. So he's going to be a little vague here. Well, he's kind of setting it up, and then we'll drive it home.
And so this year there was something that happened kind of like behind the scenes that we're like, oh, maybe this could be an episode or a segment. And then it turned into like a 2-hour story.
Yeah.
And so that's like our finale this year is 2 hours long. Yeah. Which is because we've even had a hard time like making stories that will last one episode.
Yeah.
Because we'll sometimes do multiple. And so this one just took us into like a crazy territory that was very different than anything we've done on the show before. And I'm very curious to see what people think about it, because it's like tonally very different than what we've done.
So you went to Comedy Central and you said, I'm going to need 2 hours for the season finale?
No, we didn't want to do that. We just started shooting. And then like kind of near the end of shooting it, I called Kent Alterman, who's the president of Comedy Central. And I was like, hey, so like, I know you, like, I have a contract to deliver like half-hour episodes. And I'm like, this one's like going to be a lot longer. And he's like, well, how long? And I'm like, I think it might be like 2 hours long. And he's like, he was really skeptical. And he was like, okay, well, why don't you edit it together and then like show it to me? So we did, and we screened it for him, and he was like, okay, I see what you mean. And he's
So for anyone that hasn't seen the finale, I won't give any spoilers necessarily, but I'll just tell you. So when you get to this episode, when you're watching on Hulu or wherever else it is now, when you watch it, you see an hour and a half. That's weird that they would give Nathan For You out, because without commercials, it's like an hour and a half, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially give them a movie as a finale. That's very bizarre, especially for Comedy Central. And then when you watch it, it has the vibe, for anyone that's seen The Rehearsal, Nathan Fielder's next show after Nathan For You. It has the vibe of The Rehearsal in a sense where you're like, this isn't as much of a comedy as the rest of the episodes. It's almost a drama. Like, there's certainly some very funny parts. But what it is basically they realize Bill, who is the Bill Gates impersonator, Bill has a long-lost love that he's been opining for. And Nathan helps him reconnect with this old love. He hasn't been able to get in touch with her, and he helps them reconnect. And then along the line, he kind of realizes that maybe Bill hasn't been entirely truthful with him about some things. It's a fascinating episode of television. It's like one of my favorite finales ever, which you're not expecting from this show. You would think it would just be another, Nathan would think of a wacky way to end the show, but you weren't expecting essentially a movie.
Yeah, like a slightly crazier story.
Right. Yeah, or something like he has some wacky plot to end the show,
right. Right, that he somehow got someone to agree to.
He gets himself canceled or something like that,
Right.
But no, this is like, it tugs at your heartstrings. It's beautifully done. You know, I always wonder with this stuff, like how much of it is real, because there are times where you're like, this person has to be in on it to some extent, or there has to be some editing going on here. But, you know, I don't really care because it's so well done, you know?
Right.
But yeah, it's like one of my favorite finales ever. But I think partially because you're not expecting it to go where it goes, but it really is great.
Everyone should check it out. Hulu. Go to Hulu.
Yes. Yeah, let me promote Nathan Fielder's, you know, he needed my bump, so I wanted to give the kid a shot.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't know. I figured, you know, I am always surprised when we get people say, like, particularly because some of our like Opie and Anthony stuff or Howard Stern stuff generally does the best as far as like YouTube and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we always get comments where people are like, hey, I wasn't a fan of this, but like now I'm going to check some more stuff out. Like I didn't know a ton about Opie and Anthony, or I didn't necessarily know this segment or whatever, but now I'm going to go check it out. So I'm surprised at how often we get comments like that. So hopefully some of you guys checked out this episode without watching Nathan For You and it inspires you to, because it really is a great show. And, you know, I'd be curious to know now that Nathan has had more success, how popular it is, because I still think there are a lot of people that haven't seen it, that like it just missed them. It's only 4 seasons, I think 8 episodes a season or something like that. So there's not a ton out there. So it's easy to fly through, but it's also very easy for people to miss. So make sure you go check it out if you haven't already, or give it a rewatch.
I like the idea.
Yes. And Craig should go finish it, for God's sake. He's only seen the first 2 seasons.
I know.
Yeah, so do that. But more importantly, I mean, Nathan Fielder's doing pretty well for himself. He's on screen with Emma Stone, for God's sake. Well, who you need to support is the boys. Go to blindmike.net if you'd be so kind. Support the show.
The guys.
The guys. Support the guys. Everywhere you get podcasts, whether it be Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube. Try to get those YouTube numbers pumping. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. Tap the notification bell. Like, comment, all that stuff helps the show. It helps the show grow. It gets more people like you on it. If you like the show, then YouTube, you know, knows your algorithm and they know how to get it to more people like you, I guess. So do all that if you want to support the show for free. And if you like us even more and want more of us, then become a member on Patreon or YouTube, whichever is easier for you. I recommend Patreon just because we can do more stuff there, like Quincy and any sort of watch-alongs that we do on Patreon. So check those out. But either on Patreon or YouTube, you'll always get bonus episodes as well as these episodes a week before they go out to the freeloaders. So support the show. We appreciate you guys. BlindMike.net is the easiest place to do that. And you can check out Craig's stuff, verygoodshow.org. He's been lying to us about doing a true crime podcast. But maybe one day he'll upload one.
Recording one tonight, or last night if you're listening on Patreon, and last week if you're listening for free.
Yes.
And
So verygoodshow.org.
And if we don't, that show's dead and it's never happening. And I can't trust anyone I do podcasts with.
That's the spirit.
That's the spirit.
So go to blindmike.net for this show and go to verygoodshow.org if you want to guess whether or not Craig's doing a podcast. And oh, by the way, yeah, Blind Mike Project and Who Are These Socials if you want to check out my other shows as well. So do all of that. We appreciate you guys. Feel free to send us any suggestions for future episodes. And until next time, we will see you later on Why You Laughing.
Zip it up and zip it out.